All right, welcome all into another episode of the unofficial WCC Hoops podcast. Alongside my co-host Thomas Dunn, I'm Zach Farmer, and there's been a lot of news in the WCC. We're going to actually focus a little bit more on the portal, but the big news, obviously, right away is like there are two massive paydays. Chet Holmgren, $250 million. Jalen Williams, $287 million. Summer League has started with a couple of big performances. Ryan Nembhard with 21 to outshadow Cooper Flagg's debut. And then Drew Timme with 22 and Jamari Bouye with a game winner. A lot of fun stuff over the last few days.
Absolutely. And you buried my personal lead, honestly. And the WCC sponsored a NASCAR car this past weekend. My mind was exploded because, for those of you who don't know, I'm an avid NASCAR fan. I watch week to week. I'm a diehard. That's my guilty pleasure. And I'm seeing the WCC's branding on the back of one of the D2 cars, and I'm just like, excuse me? The world crossover for me there was insane. But that's just what I wanted to start with, get it out there, because regardless of how any results happened or anything like that, that's something that's going to stick with me for a bit, because that was just a cool crossover. But going into what you were talking about is Ryan Nembhard was very composed in his summer league debut. Jamari Bouye stuck a knife through my heart and hurt my own Denver Nuggets right there. And more than anything, Chet and Jalen, if they need to spot me $10 to finish off a fast food run, I hope they provide, because they got the money, and you see it right there on the graphic. Show me the money, because Shane McMahon ain't the only one that's got the money.
No, I mean, this was coming off a championship, coming off the run that obviously OKC had. You knew that this was coming for a lot of their guys. Obviously, they also re-upped Shea to Gilgeous-Alexander to his big mega deal. But now looking at the fact that you have a Chet Holmgren 5 years, $250, you have Jalen Williams 5 years, $287, maxing out both of them. Obviously, massive feathers in the cap to both of them, but then also the two programs, Gonzaga and Santa Clara, who can really tout that these two came from those programs. And you're starting to see just the high level that is running through the WCC. Obviously, those two starting from very different spots. Chet was one of those guys right out of high school. We kind of knew exactly who Chet was. Jalen just growing into what he was, and now getting the literal payoff here of all of that work.
I do wonder, and this is just a speculation for years down the road, could we entertain the possibility of Jalen Williams, Santa Clara basketball general manager? Because I'd like that. I'd very much like that. One, for the sake of his reputation on campus now, because he was already a growing star, and you see it when he comes back every year. It's just like, oh my God, this J-Dub, even though he's obviously grown beyond Santa Clara, he's still very much beloved there, inherently. So, can we entertain that possibility? I'd certainly like to think so.
Yeah, I mean, he's someone who has remained connected to the college. He goes back to Santa Clara whenever he's in the Bay Area. We've seen him at the game, still hanging out with Herb and still connected with that program. And I do think that's, when you think about programs in general, that's always a great telling sign of the relationship that the coaching staff has built with players, is when they come back. And especially when you see them come back routinely, like Jalen does. Now Pods might be a little bit of a different scope on that, because he plays in the Bay Area, so he's always around. But you see that at St. Mary's, you see that at Gonzaga, you're seeing that more at USF, you're seeing that at Santa Clara, you're seeing that on a number of programs, and that's really the telltale sign that you're pointed in the right direction. You have a culture that you have built that players want to continue to be around after they have gone through it.
Absolutely, because I think it signifies more than anything, the more things change, the more they can stay the same in certain respects. And in this case, I think of guys like Jonathan Mobo going back to USF, and that's someone who was not in the program very long, but still feels connected enough to go back. Brandon Pajinski wasn't at the program long in Santa Clara, feels connected to go back. I'd say Gonzaga and St. Mary's are a little bit different of a case study, at least right now, just because of the way they trudge out 4-year players usually, and just kind of like the system of how it works. But I think in general the theme stays the same regardless of situation.
Now you mentioned Jonathan Mobo, and I think that's a great segue into talking about the portal classes, because CBB on top ranked its top 100 transfer classes, and obviously it's a lot of work. There's a lot of moving parts, and there's still a lot of who knows what these players are going to be. And in that top 100, there were 3 WCC teams, Gonzaga being one of them, Oregon State being another. Those two kind of made sense. But the third was one that was a school that I did not expect to see in there, and that one, I think there was a missing school, but what made it was San Diego being at 77, being on that list. And honestly, like, this is maybe the surprise of the entire thing, is because this is a San Diego team that the last couple of years has really more relied heavily on the freshmen. And we've seen, and it worked 2 years ago in year one with Steve Lavin. It did not work so well this past year. And there was a little bit of a question mark about how San Diego's kind of gone about building its rosters in this new era of college basketball. And this year, when you start to look at this roster piece by piece, who they have added, you know what? San Diego might have something going here.
You know, I don't hate much of the moves that Steve Lavin is making right now. I'd say the one thing that pops out to me is Adrian McIntyre going up from the D2 to D1 level. I think that's, you look at the prized possession, if you will, of that transfer portal class. I think that's kind of like the starting point. And when I look at Steve Lavin, I think the age old question right now is it now or never? And I think it's trending in that direction based on the downturn from last year. But I think in general they're pretty much putting together what they need to put together at this stage of the offseason. And then it becomes a question of, what's your internal development like? Because you're going to learn a lot about it with a lot of square pegs that you have to fit in round holes potentially, in terms of, okay, we've got a new team. Now the responsibility is more on me. I don't get to fall back on the idea that it's just freshmen, just young guys taking their lumps. These are veterans that are taking their lumps now, and it's my job to make them figure it out. So I look at them and I'm like, okay, I can see some pieces. I think one of my big concerns is right now I scoped their roster, and I hope I didn't overlook anybody, but I think their tallest player right now is 6'9". So I do worry about that. Like, they don't have like the beef. And I mean that not even for the sense of the Gonzagas and St. Mary's of the world, but not like the Santa Claras and the LMUs of the world, because it takes a toll over the course of a conference slate.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned a couple of the names, and the size can be a little bit of a concern, but the Adrian McIntyre, this is someone who was the Pac West Player of the Year last year, averaging nearly 28 a game. You look at some of the other veterans, Bradley Ezewiro coming over from UAB. He had been at St. Louis and Georgetown and LSU. This is going to be someone who's going to bring a presence inside at the 6'9" forward. Tim Moore Jr. coming over from NJIT. Tenari Lane coming over from Georgia State. You look at a familiar name, Wanzi Gorosito is coming back to the WCC.
Didn't stay away
after a pretty solid year at Ball State. So like, they have pieces that are going to give you that veteran experience. They're not going to be overwhelmed necessarily by the moment, where you look at maybe some of the other WCC teams, at least like on the bottom third, that there's going to be more inexperience maybe with some of those teams, maybe like a Pepperdine or a Portland. But the San Diego team, at the very least, is going to bring a level of experience that they just have not had over the first few years of Steve Lavin's tenure.
And now you're hoping, you wish you could turn back the clock a little bit and kind of mix some of that young success from the 23-24 season and try and, make a little magic potion for right now. And like the certain names I thought about back then from when San Diego was on the rise, with like Keon Kenzie, and you have like Kevin Patton Jr. Like, those are two guys. I'm like, oh man, there's exciting, intriguing pieces. And now you look at it now, it's like, man, I wish there was some time to just go look at it and just clop them together and just see what happens. We don't know we can't project where they would have finished, because obviously the rosters didn't pan out that way, but it makes you think in the back of your mind. I would at least think, if you're a Toreros fan, saying, what if, but a lot of programs are asking that same question nowadays.
Yeah. It's the San Diego squad. It's like, it's going to be, I don't want to oversell what San Diego is yet, because this is a team that sat at the bottom of the league. We still need to see that these pieces are going to work together. I mean, you could look at LMU team a year ago as a team as an example of where, or maybe not last year, but 2 years ago, there was a lot of pieces that came in, they looked good, and they just didn't fit. And that's part of what we're going to see here is, do the pieces fit? Now, you might have a few guys at the same similar positions that you could say like, oh, if this one doesn't work, maybe this one will work, or maybe this one will work, but they have to work in concert together. Like it can't just necessarily be like all or nothing. And that's the one thing with San Diego. They're going to take some lumps early on. I think no matter what, we're going to see that early in the non-conference. But as we can continue to roll through, we're going to see a bit more and more of whether the San Diego team is going to be more of a factor in conference play or not.
And I think more than anything too is they have kind of a higher threshold of needed proof of concept compared to some other teams, because they haven't. When you have such a downturn like that, it's like, oh, it almost comes as a shell shock. So in San Diego's case, we're talking about them right now. We're saying, all right, here's some nice accolades, here's some nice numbers, but at the end of the day, like 5-10 games in, they got to be proving it, because then otherwise it was all for naught.
Yeah. Now one of the things we started talking about was a bit more of the other portal classes and who did kind of jump out at us. And that's obviously like the other two, Oregon State, Gonzaga also being in there. We will talk a bit about the Gonzaga front with LockedOn Zags host Andy Patton in just a little bit, because obviously they had some big moves, but they're not the only ones who've had obviously an active off season. Santa Clara's had an active off season. Washington State has done some work, really up and down the list. As I'm trying to think, I mean, like San Francisco is the one that kind of jumps out at me as the glaring missing team from that.
Yep.
Which I even tagged them. I was like, hey, excuse me, where's USF? And they mistakenly said like, oh, they're right there. No, that's South Florida, the wrong USF, which always is a thing. And I'm sure the USF folks, the San Francisco folks, are annoyed at that beyond belief, which it bothers me as well. But thinking about a team that like that was missing from that list, a team and teams that maybe not were in top 100, but Santa Clara did work. You look at Washington State, they have added some nice pieces. Who are like what is a team that's kind of stuck out to you? And maybe you're going to bring up, of course, your Broncos to be kind of that interesting bunch.
Well, I think they're interesting, but they're interesting in more of the unknown as opposed to the appealing. And I'm not saying that to say that they're going to be a bad team this year. I just don't know. I don't know that they've replaced enough of the core yet, and a lot of the proven core. It feels like it was a dip more into the world of, let's hope we can land another Brandon Pajemski amidst the world of high major transfers that just didn't get a chance. And again, that's just a projection. That's not like concrete of, hey, this is what happened, this is what's going to happen. But that was like the immediate thought that came to mind. They're trying to bank on cracking open the piggy bank and finding another Brandon Pajemski, kind of with like Garrick Normand, and then like Chris Tajo, like from Iowa. Like those are the two guys that pop out to me, both coming from Big Ten schools, but didn't necessarily get the opportunity. But in terms of your initial question of what school do you think should have been on that list, I do think it should have been USF, because you look at, I think it's Trilly Donovan who makes like the phrase of, sometimes the biggest like transfer win is the ones that stay. So in this case, Tyron Riley coming back. I think Mookie Cook would be a good addition from Oregon. Guillermo Diaz-Graham from Pitt, is that the Diaz-Graham brothers, even though they're both now in the WCC, like they could absolutely shoot the rock, and I think they'll be a good stretch option. I think the one thing that immediately comes to mind for USF, and it's the age-old question every year, do they have enough beef to sustain against Gonzaga and St. Mary's on the boards? And we'll kind of wait and see. Right now, it's not. It could be better, but I don't really necessarily know what other moves they need to make in order to get there right now. I mean, we're in mid-July at this point, but that's just the one thing that comes to mind inherently. And I think that's the one thing that we're all doing right now with all these different teams. Like the first games are not for another, let's see, 4+ months. We still have a ways to go in trying to figure out of what the identity of this team is. But the first thing that comes to mind is I think USF got better. I think they got more shots in the arm. I think just in general, what kind of physicality can they continue to sustain? But Chris Gerlofson is not going to leave any stone unturned. He's still going to demand the very best from his squad.
All right. Now, one of the things that we know the Zags have been very active as well. You think about some of the additions, bringing in the likes of Miller from Arizona State. You think about the fact that they also have maybe a name that I know our next guest, Andy Patton, has brought up on LockedOn Zags. Steele Venters is another name I know that is almost addition by the fact that he's healthy, and we'll talk a little bit more about that with him. And let's get him on to talk about that. So bringing in Andy Patton from the LockedOn Zags podcast. Andy, I mean, there's been a lot of Zag news, a lot to talk about here, but just wanted to get the instant reaction of Ryan Nembhard's big night, overshadowing Cooper Flagg's debut at Summer League.
Yeah, Ryan looked excellent, and it's funny. So many people were wondering the same thing that we were wondering right after the draft, which was, why didn't he get picked? Like, why did he fall out of the draft? And, I think there's potentially some, of him working with his agents to try to get him to a spot that he wanted to be. And Dallas is an incredible fit with Kyrie Irving out for so long. And so maybe that's part of the answer there, but he sure looked like a player that deserved to be one of the first 59 players selected. I mean, 21 points, hit that go-ahead three in the final minute of the game, just kind of commanded the game like he did for 2 years at Gonzaga and like he did at Creighton before that. We know he's a little undersized. We know the defense is a question, but there was just never really any doubt for me, and I'm sure many Gonzaga fans and many WCC fans who watched him the last couple of years, who just knew, like, if he wants to get to a spot, if he wants to find a teammate, like, he has the ability to do that. And even being at the highest level in the NBA is not going to stop him from doing that. And that's what we saw from him in a game where Cooper Flagg, maybe didn't look exactly like himself. In some ways, Ryan was kind of the straw that stirred the drink for that Dallas team, and made a very strong impression in his quest to be on that roster more often than not this upcoming season.
And Andy, when you look at like the Gonzaga guys that are spread out all over the course of Summer League rosters, was it inherently always Ryan that was kind of like the most intriguing to see how he would kind of fit and, so to speak, stir the drink for you? Or was there someone else that kind of popped out in mind? It's like, if nothing else, I just want to see how they fit.
Yeah, Ryan's definitely the answer, especially among like the new guys doing Summer League for the first time. I think I'm very intrigued by how Drew Timme's going to look, and he looked outstanding yesterday as well. On Thursday, scored I think 22 for Brooklyn. Only missed a couple of shots, but we've kind of seen Drew. I think among the new guys, the other one that interests me is Caleb Battle. Not as much from is he going to fight his way onto an NBA roster spot, but Summer League is inherently a little less structured. And with the foul rules the way that they are, it's pretty easy to get to the line a lot. And I feel like Caleb Battle's the kind of player who might put up some really big numbers in Summer League and kind of get some attention on him. I don't know if it'll translate into him making a roster necessarily, but I think if he wants to be in the G League, I could see him being the kind of guy who puts up big G League numbers every year. And maybe that's enough for him to find his way onto a roster. So I'm intrigued by seeing what he can do. I think he has one very obviously NBA caliber skill, and that's the drawing the contact and getting to the free throw line. The outside shooting is questionable. The defense, he's hardworking, but is a bit limited size wise on that space as well. But the ability to get downhill and get to the cup is something that NBA teams really want, and I think he's going to put that on full display during Summer League, and it could be enough for him to get himself a nice payday this year.
Hey, all it takes is one opportunity, and even if you become like a career like G Leaguer with the odd ever chance of getting elevated up to a main squad like that, that'll play. Like I think of Andre Ingram all the way back in the day with the Lakers, like that. Yep. It's not the end of the world. You're playing pro hoops and you're still enjoying professional career.
Yeah, and I mean, thinking about just any number of guys, obviously there's a ton of Zags. Is there a non-Zag that's intriguing you in Summer League? And maybe Jamari Bouye might be the more obvious one, at least of the last 24 hours because of his game winner.
I love Jamari Bouye. I was at one of the very few games he played for the Portland Trailblazers a few years ago or 2 years ago, I think, just by chance, because I think they were playing Oklahoma City. So I went to go see Chet, and Bouye was there. I've loved him since his San Francisco career. He's so much fun to watch. So yeah, I think I would definitely pick him. I would also, Marcus Williams had a really nice game. I think it was his second game with Miami. He had like 10 or 11 points off the bench for them. And I saw a few highlights of him just getting to his spots and hitting some pull-up jumpers and making some good passes. So he's certainly somebody that I, always enjoyed watching. at San Francisco. And so somebody that I want to see kind of do well in summer league. There's some non-WCC guys that I'm intrigued by as well. As a Portland Trailblazers fan, I'm really interested to see how Caleb Love looks. He's on the Blazers summer league team. We've seen him for about 100 years in college basketball, so we kind of know the gist with him, but I'm still intrigued. And Keyshawn Bartholomew was at Oregon last year. He's also on the Blazers summer league team. So there's some guys out there that I'm watching. But yeah, I think Marcus Williams is probably the most notable recent WCC alumni. Again, you probably know more than me with the health status for Augustus Marciulionis with the Lakers. I know he's got that Exhibit 10 deal, which is a good deal for him, but not sure how much we'll see of him, but I'm interested to see what he can do too.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see about that. I'm actually kind of interested to see how much more run and Alex Dukas is going to get over with Oklahoma City coming off the championship. He had a good outing during the California Classic coming off the bench. I noticed he had a DNP yesterday, but obviously plenty of games to go. And we'll probably see some level of, because he's on their G League squad, he's on a two-way. So he'll eventually get some level of run as they're trying to get a better look at him.
And I think there's a bigger development at play for Dukas. I heard there was some talks of him going back and forth potentially with the Brisbane Bullets or the NBL. So it could be batting 1,000 in terms of being an NBA champion for his career, but which, I would take that. Me personally, I would. But there is a world where they said that he could be heading back towards the homeland. So I'm intrigued to see that. And I would agree that for me, the non-Zag would be Jamari Bouye, because I think all three of us share the same experience of him being a pain in our butts.
Yeah.
Like the one thing I share and I will vividly remember is when he would go to that wing step back three, it's like, all right, where it's going in, just take the ball out, get back down the court. Like it felt inevitable at times.
Yeah, he's complete money.
So let's get back to the Zags on the court this season, that are going to be playing for the Zags. And there have been a lot of movement with the Zags. Just thinking about the new roster additions, obviously with the extended portal period, there's still potential there as well. What are you looking at? What is kind of like your feeling about the Zags team going in, and maybe what we saw from the portal specifically, and your read on what the Zags were able to do?
Yeah, I think this is a team that's going to be improved defensively from where they were last year, which was a pretty significant area of need. I mean, they, had that stretch in the middle of conference play where they lost at Oregon State and then turned around and gave up 100 plus to Santa Clara at home. And they had a decent season outside of that. Lost some really crushing games in the non-conference to some really good teams, but the defense was an issue. And I think this unit's going to be better. I'm still a little worried about the front court defense. I mean, Graham Ike and Braden Huff are both not super elite defensive players, specifically away from the rim, but Ismail Adiani is going to take a step forward and play some more minutes. And he's an absolute mountain of a man who I think is going to be a problem on that end of the floor. And I think assuming the waiver goes through for Tyon Grant Foster, his length on the perimeter and experience, I think, is going to help them there. And I think Emmanuel Innocente is going to take a step, and Jalen Warley, who they got from Virginia via Florida State in the transfer portal. He's somebody who's always been lauded for his defense and his length on the perimeter as well. So I think they're going to be an improved defensive team. They're going to be one of the oldest teams in college basketball next year by a huge margin. I mean, their average age is like almost 22 for the team. And so, I think.
Okay, BYU.
Yeah, exactly. It's a weird kind of dynamic because this team has a lot of new faces in the sense of players we haven't seen play for Gonzaga before, but Steele Venters has been on the bench for 2 years. Jalen Warley's been on the bench for a year. Braden Smith has been on the bench for a year. So they've all played with each other. I mean, Steele hasn't really played, but they've all gotten comfortable with each other. And, for Braden Smith, I think the ability to have spent a year redshirting and learning from Ryan Nembhard and competing against him in practice and understanding the offense. I mean, we saw when Ryan got to campus, his first year at Gonzaga, he struggled in the first half of the season. And this is an incredibly talented player, obviously. And I think he struggled just with new teammates and a new system. And so for Braden to have gotten the experience where that struggle shouldn't really happen as much early in the year. He's not as good as Ryan, and I don't think he'll ultimately put up the same numbers, but he's not going to have that lull period at the beginning of the season. I think that's a huge advantage for Gonzaga. So it'll be it'll be a different year with so many new faces, with Miller and Grant Foster and Smith all being guys we haven't seen before, and same with Warley and the two freshmen coming in, Fogel and Jefferson, and of course Mario Saint-Superi, the international guard from Spain, who, you know, I'm curious how much he's going to play. He's very talented and the upside is extremely high, but Mark Few typically doesn't play those international kids a ton of minutes early, especially when, I mean, he's just getting to campus a couple weeks ago. So, you know, he's got he's a year disadvantage behind Braden Smith in terms of understanding the system. So there's a lot of intrigue on this roster, a lot of more questions than we're typically used to having. But the talent on this roster is undeniable. They got 11 or 12 guys, it feels like, and they're only going to have 8 spots. So I'm interested to see how it all shakes out.
Is this easily a top 15 talented team?
I think so. Yeah, I think they're right around 15. A lot of places have them in like the late teens, early 20s. I have them a little higher than that. I think a lot of the rankings haven't been updated since the Saint-Superi edition as well, which is a huge, I mean, it's the backup point guard position they didn't really have on the roster. And we know that Mark Few kind of loves to play those 2 guard lineups. And I think Adam Miller is obviously going to be the projected starter at the 2. He's a kind of a Nolan Hickman clone in a lot of ways, but he's not really a point guard. So I think that having another point guard helps them. But from a talent perspective, I mean, just Huff and Ike alone is a top 5, maybe top 3 front court in all of college basketball. And I think there's enough people kind of sleeping on the Smith-Miller backcourt to maybe not rank them that highly, but don't count me among them. I think that's going to be a really good backcourt. And I think that if they can find the 3-point shooting consistently, which is going to require Miller to shoot like he did last year, which was 43% at Arizona State, it's going to require Steele Venters to be healthy and play a significant role because Jalen Warley's not a 3-point shooter. Innocente is not a 3-point shooter. Smith's kind of mediocre at it. Saint-Superi is not projected to be a great shooter. So that's an area that I'm like, maybe going to potentially be an issue for the Zags like it was last year. But if they find the right guys and they get some shooting from some of those players, this team's going to be really dangerous.
You mentioned Steele Venters a couple different times, and he feels like it was almost like the kind of the forgotten man because we've seen him just get hurt right before the season. The last 2 years, we haven't gotten to see the promise that we thought we might see coming out of Eastern Washington going into this year, hopefully healthy. That this is it feels like he's a potential X factor for this team. Again, you mentioned 3-point shooting. He has the size, and he was going to be a critical part of the last 2 teams, the last couple of years. What is maybe his role going into this year, assuming he is healthy and ready to go?
Yeah, you know, I think I was reading a great article from our good friend Theo Lawson of the Spokesman Review, who talked to Steele and talked to Steele's family and some of the staff kind of around Hoopfest weekend as Steele got officially cleared by doctors. It sounds like he still needs to be cleared by the athletic training staff, but he's been doing 2-on-2 and some 3-on-3 work, and he reported he's about a month away from doing full 5-on-5. He posted some videos of him working out, and he sure looks like he's moving around great. So there's optimism that he will be back. I think to put into perspective how long it's been for Steele, he actually committed to Gonzaga a week before Ryan Nembhard did. And Ryan Nembhard completed a 2-year career at Gonzaga and set multiple program records, and Steele has never set foot on the floor. So it's a really sad situation for him. But when they first brought Steele in, they envisioned him in kind of a Corey Kispert type role. And he's the same size and a similar movement shooter who is very good at backdoor cuts and very good at relocating and getting open looks from 3. And he's a knockdown 3-point shooter. It's 43% and 37%, I think, is his 2 full seasons at Eastern. So Corey Kispert played a lot of the 4 at Gonzaga. You know, you think about that team that went to the national championship in 2020-21. They started Suggs and Yayi and Kispert and Watson originally. So Kispert was playing the 3, but about halfway through the year, they benched Watson and they started Nembhard. And at that point, they kind of slid Corey up to the 4. And that's when the team really hit their stride. And so I could see Steele Venters kind of playing that backup 4 minutes. Anybody who's watched this Gonzaga team the last few years knows that relying on Graham Ike and Braden Huff and Ismaila Diani to play a combined 80 front court minutes between the 2 positions, that's not going to happen. They're foul prone. I don't think Huff's ever played more than 17 minutes per game. I don't even think Graham's played more than like 24 minutes per game in his Gonzaga career. So they're going to need some more minutes in that front court. Maybe it's the freshman Parker Jefferson, but he was the 3-star prospect who I don't think is going to be expected to play a huge role right away. So to me, I think the answer is Steele, and he's not exactly, he's more like Kispert obviously than like a Ben Gregg, but he can kind of fill the role of moving around the perimeter, looking for open shots, putting the ball on the deck, trying to crash the glass. He's not as good of a rebounder, and you give up something there, but I think you're willing to do that to get some more consistent floor spacing. I mean, if he's able to do that, that creates driving lanes for Grant Foster, driving lanes for Braden Smith. Like, it really opens up the floor in a way that I think could be really valuable for this team. So I don't know how many minutes he's going to play. It's really hard to project. My guess is not a ton, but if he's fully healthy and he establishes himself over Jalen Warley, over Emmanuel Innocente, kind of able to carve out some of those minutes, I mean, he has a skill set that there's not a lot of our players on this team that really do. And I think that could allow him to play some serious minutes for this team.
Does it also almost allow him to have an unfair burden of expectation in a certain sense? Because we talked about the 3-point shooting and how sometimes like this roster can go ice cold in a second. You kind of think of his journey to get back and kind of be that player that he was at Eastern. Does it almost create, and I don't know if that's necessarily a fair statement for him, does that create an unfair burden of expectation in your mind from maybe a certain segment of the fan base?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think kind of, yeah. I mean, I think for like Nolan Hickman was the team's best 3-point shooter last year. And it felt like there was when he would have a bad shooting night, which would often result in the entire team having a bad shooting night because nobody else on the team was very good. The Zags would, have a game where they go 3 of 17 from 3. And it's like, people would be like, Hickman went 1 of 4. And it's like, okay, like the rest of the team went 2 of 13. Like it's, it's not just him. And I could see that being a thing for Steele. I think there was certainly some, the first year in particular where Steele got hurt 2 days before the season, it was like, okay, obviously Gonzaga was expecting him to be a player. Then the next year it was a little earlier in the offseason that he got hurt, but they still kind of were expecting him to be back. And so I think that it's you're relying on him to be that player. But I do think that if the rest of the team's not shooting well, it can't just fall on Steele. Are there going to be fans who put that burden of expectation on him to come in and be a 45% shooter? Sure. There absolutely will be. And I don't know that he'll be that guy, but I don't think he's going to play 25 to 30 minutes per game. And so I think that putting any kind of expectation on him to like save the team as a 3-point shooter in what'll be a smaller role is not going to be entirely fair, although it probably will happen.
Yeah. And I feel like a lot of the WCC teams right now, and in fact, all of them, they all have questions right now. Everyone likes to think, hey, my transfer class, they're great. They're going to fix every single hole that we have. And you walk out there and everyone kind of takes a lens from the outside. It's like, well, it's not necessarily true. There's still X, Y, and Z holes potentially. When you look at Gonzaga's transfer class, you look how it fits in with some of the returners. What are some of those initial questions beyond the interior defense that you're like, we'll see?
Yeah. I think that's a good question as well. I think for Gonzaga, the number one question is Tyron Grant Foster going to be eligible? Obviously, that's a big one because he's not getting to work out with the team right now while he waits for that waiver to be approved. For Tyron Grant Foster, this is a kid who, it's really easy to be excited about if you just look at what he did in the 23-24 season when he was the WAC player of the year, 20 points per game, 6 rebounds, was one of the best scorers in all of college basketball, tore up the Gales in the NCAA tournament and nearly willed that team to a win over Alabama, who went to the Elite Eight that year. But then last year, Grant Foster didn't look like that guy. A lot of the time he was very inconsistent, particularly early in the year. He was dealing with an ankle injury. And I think that gives some optimism that, hey, if he's fully healthy this year, that's not going to be a problem. But I think both Grant Foster and Adam Miller are guys who have had one very good season where if you look at that season, it's exactly what you want them to do at Gonzaga, but they haven't been that player every year. Obviously, Grant Foster's dealt with a ton of injuries and the heart condition and everything. And Adam Miller, he's like a 31% 3-point shooter until last year when he shot 43. And it's like, it's great to bring in a 43% 3-point shooter, but is he actually that guy? Or is he a 35% 3-point shooter? Because that's a huge difference when you look at Adam Miller, and there's not a lot of other skills that are super valuable to this Gonzaga team. He is here to shoot threes. He's not a point guard. He's not a great defensive player. He's not LaFoul Merchant. Like, he is a floor spacing 3-point shooter. And I think he can do that. But if he can't, honestly, he becomes somebody who might not even have a rotation spot. Innocente could pass him. Mario Saint-Superi could pass him. So there are some players that I'm like a little concerned about. I think front court depth is still one of them as well. If Steele Venters can fill that role, great. If not, where do those minutes come from? Do you play Jalen Warley at the 4? He kind of played like point forward at Florida State. It feels weird to play him at the 4. Are you relying on a 3-star freshman who wasn't a top 150 prospect? That's probably not great. So yeah, there's still some questions for this team, but I think that the amount of experience they have playing together from practices and stuff over the last year, and the archetypes of the transfers that they brought in, I think fit the roster really well, like you said. But how does that actually all come together? Are these players the best versions of themselves? Because if not, this roster could end up being more challenging for Coach Few than we're maybe anticipating.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of these WCC squads, and maybe you guys disagree with your own squads, but there's going to be a lot more trial period for a lot of these teams than there has been in years past. And then when I take a step back from the outside and I look at the Zags roster, I'd say for me, and who knows, maybe the fans disagree and don't think it's a fair statement, I feel like the secondary creation can devolve into something that's like, it's not something that you're used to seeing with an A-Zag team. So in my case, if Braden Smith goes to the bench with foul trouble, does Talon Grant Foster get the ball and just say, you know what, it's Talon Grant Foster time, I'm going downhill, and he gets picked on the help side like over and over. And then you turn into more of an ISO team compared to the nice, crisp ball movement that a Mark Few team is used to having. So that's what I'm kind of intrigued to see, of who kind of steps up into that role. And it might just end up being Mario Saint. Like it might just be that, but we don't know yet.
Yeah, I would say it's probably St. Sperry, just because he's drawn Ricky Rubio comparisons for his passing, but how ready is he? I mean, I think that's a huge question too. Like, because you're right, if Braden Smith is not Ryan Nembhard, and also Ryan Nembhard played 35 minutes a game because when Ryan Nembhard was not on the floor for Gonzaga, Nolan Hickman's not really a point guard. He was fine, but he wasn't a point guard, and so I think that is an issue for Gonzaga too, of like, Tyron Grant Foster can absolutely be the guy with the ball in his hands. It's just, he's not going to facilitate the offense the way that we're typically used to seeing it. So if St. Superi can't step into that role, that puts a lot more pressure on Braden Smith, which could be a challenge for Gonzaga, because you could put the weight of the world on Ryan Nembhard's shoulder and he could handle it. I'm not saying Braden Smith can't, but very few players can, and we haven't seen him prove that yet.
Yeah. So let's transition a little bit and talk a bit about the fact that this is the last season of the Zags in the WCC. The Pac-12 obviously has announced the media rights deals. A lot of that has come through. Just kind of talk a bit about, I guess it's the excitement from the Zags front on about the Pac-12, the fact that this is now, it's coming to fruition. The 8th football team member is there. It's real now. And the final countdown is upon us. So as you think about the Zags prepping for that transition, the Zag fan base prepping for that transition, what is kind of your excitement level as you're getting prepped for that?
Yeah, it's funny because the big news in the last month for the Pac-12 has been the addition, of course, of Texas State, and that in and of itself is not particularly exciting for Gonzaga. Texas State is not a historically good basketball program. I cannot imagine that Mark Few is thrilled about road trips to San Marcos, but I think overall it's hard to not be excited in an era where the amount of money that your program has is the single most important thing in terms of your ability to remain competitive with your peers and with the rest of the college basketball world in general. You have to have money to be able to facilitate your programs now that you can pay players directly through the house settlement. And so for Gonzaga, like, the fact that they're leaving a conference where the amount of money that they were making is something probably like 5 to 6 times less than what they're going to make in the Pac-12, even with some of the lower estimations of what this Pac-12 media deal is going to look like. And then combine that with the unique fact that Gonzaga is in a conference where every other team is going to be spending the majority of that money on their football programs. I think with few exceptions, I think San Diego State and Brian Dutcher is going to be able to make a compelling argument to get maybe 25, maybe even 30% of the money that San Diego State has. But even if it's as high as 30%, Gonzaga is going to probably have 75% of their money spent on their men's basketball team because they don't have to spend it on football. And so Gonzaga is in such a unique situation where they can, I mean, not only do they have a huge advantage competing against the rest of the schools in their new conference, which is, a very good basketball conference with San Diego State, as well as Boise State and Colorado State and Utah State have had recent success. And Wazoo was in the tournament a few years ago before their coaching change. So I think that there's some decent hoops in this league, but Gonzaga just, they walked their way into a really, really fortuitous situation for them financially and competitively. And so it's hard to not feel anything other than excitement. There's a little bit of sadness. I love the WCC. I always have. I worked at the University of Portland for 2 years. I went to grad school at Seattle U as they enter the WCC now. So I have a lot of connections to this conference. And my sister went to the University of San Francisco. Like I'm going to miss the WCC, but Gonzaga would be deeply regretting it if they hadn't made this move, because it puts them in such a good position to compete in this sport, at least for the next couple of years, until eventually this NIL situation likely resolves itself in a way where those schools that want to be more competitive are able to be more competitive and can figure out ways to get around the NIL Go system. But there's a reason Gonzaga is being really aggressive in pursuing some of the best players in the 2026 and 2027 recruiting classes. And that's because they feel like they're in a unique, advantageous position right now, and they're trying to capitalize. And that's a lot of fun to track right now.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, Andy, for hopping on. It's always great to chat with you. We'll obviously talk more as we get closer and closer to the season. We know the schedules are probably going to be coming out probably next month or so. Media Day, obviously, a few months from now. A lot of excitement still happening. But thanks a lot for hopping on. Always great to chat with you and talk some WCC hoops.
Zach Thomas, appreciate it, guys. It's a lot of fun. Thanks.
I want to thank Andy Patton one more time for hopping on. It's always great to talk with him, talk some Zags hoops. And obviously, like, there's a lot of excitement about the Pac-12 shift, like what the Zags are going to look like this year. Some big questions for that roster, but I think they're in a good spot as we pretty much are all. I mean, I already have them slotted in as my favorite going into the year, at least right now. But another piece of big news that came out over the last few days was that the NCAA, the Division I, the men's basketball committee is going to be meeting this week, and the topic of tournament expansion obviously has come up again. And this is a topic that has been very contentious, mainly I think on one side for most of basketball fandom, of do not expand the tourney. But here we are again with this conversation, and it really is, it feels like we're getting close to it being inevitable, but the voices from the fandom just do not like this move.
It's dumb, stupid, and idiotic. Does not need to happen. Okay, as I get closer to my computer so people can understand this. And by people, I mean you, NCAA. And I mean that with full respect to who's on that committee, because I know there's some bright minds on there. But this is literally just a money media grab and nothing else. No ifs, ands, or buts about it, and there's no strings attached to any of that. All right, they need to just figure it out. Leave the tournament as be. You don't fix what's not broken, and take away kind of like the integrity, for lack of a better phrase, of one of the best things that sports has to offer.
And the one thing with the expansion, it's one thing to talk about 72 or 76. The idea in and of itself of including more teams is fine if that meant that you would get more deserving mid-majors into the tournament. But we know that that's not what would happen. We know we would end up with more middle of the pack, now probably lower end of the pack, power conference teams that get in. Probably wouldn't be very long before an at-large team has a record below 500. And that is where, like, we need this. I know the power conferences drive the bus and they have forever, but no one wants to see those games. I mean, we're even seeing some of these first four games be absolute garbage because some of these teams are involved who really shouldn't be in there in the first place. So if we're talking about games that are going to look more like that, I don't think anybody thinks that that's a good watch, or that that's actually a good investment for the quality of the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, I can't wait till I see a 19 and 17 Big Ten team make it into the dance that finish in like 12th place. Like, that's going to be so riveting, so fun to go see them in Dayton. That's going to be a great time. Can you guys tell how excited I am?
Sure. 12th place, 14th place. Come on.
Golly. I mean, it just infuriates me, because March Madness, in my opinion, is the best postseason in sports. And for me, it's like, for my money, like, just for some context of who I am, I'm not a morning person. But when I see that March Madness is on, I will set that alarm for the round of 64 and round of 32 at 9:15 a.m. and watch the whole way through for 4 days on. Like, This is like the sicko peak for me.
The first 2 weekends are the best. The first two rounds, the first weekend of March Madness is the best weekend in sports. It's like this is it. You get basketball basically from morning till night. You get there. I love having all the screens up at once, of like having 5-6 games running all at the same time. Like, this is what makes this event fun. And the one thing that makes it fun is also largely they are competitive games. That's the one thing that we want to continue to have, is competitive games. And I don't think we get a lot of that from some of these lower tiered power conference schools versus a team like, say, an Indiana State a couple years ago that should have been in, or you think about even think about this year. Like, I would have well before taken USF or Santa Clara before some of the teams that did get in, that were at-large teams, because of just the competitiveness or like the capability of said squads. I mean, like, that Santa Clara team beat how many tournament teams? They were involved in so many of those matchups. Obviously, like, record-wise, whatever, like they didn't have the resume, whatever, to get in, but on an entertainment value, they would have been more competitive than some of those teams that did.
Yeah, and my lasting remarks on this is, John Rothstein will put out, this is March, and for me, when I see this topic of tourney expansion, my thing that comes to mind, this is a farce. So we're gonna, let me let one fly real quick. So those are my thoughts, Zach. I'm gonna leave the floor with you, unless if you can beat that conclusion.
I cannot. And so on that note, we will wrap up this episode of the Unofficial WCC Hoops podcast. Be sure to follow along on social media at Unofficial WCC Pod. Subscribe to the podcast on YouTube or wherever you are streaming. That'll wrap it up. We will be back next week with another episode. We'll be diving into a little bit more of Summer League, and then obviously be picking up on whatever news is rolling out as well. Thanks a lot, everybody, and we will catch you later.